The descent to Dovener 7 was smoother than expected. The shuttle glided through emerald clouds, breaking into a vast canopy of engineered flora and crystalline biodomes nestled among violet hills. Evan Mace shifted in his seat, watching the colony come into view beneath the reinforced window. This was his third assignment this year, and like always, he expected nothing more than another quiet stint of repairs, recalibrations, and solitude. That was how he liked it. Systems were easier than people. Machines didn't whisper behind your back or expect you to smile when you didn't want to. As the shuttle touched down with a cushioned thud, Evan gathered his toolkit and stepped out into the warm, filtered air of the colony's docking platform. The air had a faint citrus-like scent, probably from one of the planet's native pollen filters. He took it in with a quiet breath and moved toward the main entrance arch where newcomers were scanned and logged. That's when he noticed it. Movement slowed. A group of technicians paused mid-conversation to glance at him. A Kithra woman, tall, feline, with golden fur and sleek eyes, tilted her head with deliberate curiosity. 3 Zalani in lavender robes stopped walking altogether. They didn't look away when he met their gaze. He passed them with a frown, brushing it off. Maybe they weren't used to humans. Maybe his uniform had a stain he didn't notice. Maybe he had something on his face. He rubbed his cheek with the back of his hand. The entry checkpoint was staffed by a smooth-voiced crystalline entity who scanned his ID with ease. Evan Mace, systems engineer. Assigned to Grid 3 maintenance, it said. Yeah, Evan nodded. I'll just need housing coordinates and clearance for utility access. All provided. Quarters are in Habitat Wing B, Section 12. Welcome to Dovener 7. The voice was pleasant, but even the crystal being seemed to study him a second longer than necessary before handing over his datapad. Evan walked on. The halls were clean, wide, and filled with color-coded signs, exactly the kind of efficient environment he preferred. But the feeling followed him, eyes turning, lingering. He entered the mess hall to grab a quick meal before reporting to his station. The second he stepped in, the hum of conversation dimmed. One of the cooks, an insectoid with shimmering wings, nearly dropped a tray. A group of young Vortani women sitting by the window stopped eating mid-bite. Evan ordered protein broth and tried not to notice how many turned to look when he sat down. Halfway through his meal, a female medic passed by, gave him a warm smile, and dropped something on his tray. A flower, blue, pulsing faintly. He looked up in confusion, but she was already walking away. Evan stood abruptly. He wasn't hungry anymore. He returned his tray and walked out. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't fear. They weren't fascinated by him. They were calculating, measuring. He got to his quarters in silence. The room was simple. A narrow bed, a storage locker, a small kitchen alcove. It should have felt familiar, but the moment he stepped inside, the door sensor chirped, and he froze. Footsteps. Someone had been following him. He waited until the footsteps passed, then locked the door manually. For the first time in years, he double-checked it. He set his toolkit on the counter and turned on the comms console just to hear something human, something normal. Instead, a message blinked at him. Medical profile update required. Genetic variants flagged. Bioadaptability score exceeds known parameters. Evan blinked. Bioadaptability? There was a name listed below. Dr. Halesh Suni, biophysician, Genetic Advisory Council. He closed the screen. Outside, he swore he heard a soft laugh through the hallway. Inside, he sat on the edge of his bed and whispered, "What the hell is going on?" The following morning, Evan Mace woke to a soft chime pulsing from the room's wall interface. He rolled out of bed slowly, the stiff ache in his shoulders reminding him of how poorly he'd slept. Dreams had come in flashes, faces staring without. Blinking, whispers in languages he didn't know, footsteps that never stopped. He rubbed his eyes and swiped the alert open. Report to atmospheric. Grid 3 inspection cycle 9. Supervisor clearance granted. That part wasn't strange. What followed was, escort unit assigned. Expect accompaniment. Evan frowned. Escort? Maintenance assignments were almost always solo unless the system involved hazard protocol or chemical risk. Grid 3 was nothing more than a series of ventilation stacks and carbon scrubbers nestled into the colony's outer ring. He dressed quickly, slinging his tools over one shoulder, and left without breakfast. As he moved through the corridors, he caught glimpses of them again, female colonists pausing as he passed. Some tried to appear casual, others didn't bother. A group of Vertani engineers standing by a lift smiled as he approached, but their expressions twisted into something more focused the moment his back was turned. He turned into a quieter hallway. Near the greenhouse dome, where mossy growth lined the walls in soft shades of green and teal. His steps slowed when he saw a tall figure waiting for him. She stood with arms crossed over a vest of flexible armor, scales glinting dark blue under the hallway lights. A thick tail rested against her leg. Her eyes were sharp, golden, and fixed on him with complete stillness. "You are Evan Mace," she stated. "That's what my badge says. I am Commander Sitha Torvani. Escort detail. Your military?" Evan blinked. "This is a filter inspection, not a war zone." She stepped forward, her voice even but powerful. "You've been designated as colony-protected personnel. Until further notice, I will accompany you to all high-traffic sectors." He laughed just once and without humor. "You're serious?" She didn't blink. "Fine," Evan muttered. "Let's go inspect some fans." They walked in silence for a while. At first, he tried to ignore her presence, but the tension clung to him like static. She didn't ask questions, didn't offer help. Just watched. By midday, the work had taken them down into one of the venting basins. Evan crouched to tighten a relay bolt when he felt a presence at his shoulder. He looked up, expecting Torvani. Instead, a Zilani woman with pale lavender skin and a cascade of dark curls knelt beside him, holding out a sealed coolant vial. "You forgot this," she said softly. "I didn't ask for—" Evan paused. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," she said with a small smile. "But I've studied your work. You're careful, gentle with delicate machinery. That says a lot. Thanks, I guess." She touched the tool in his hand gently. Her fingers were cool. "I'm Letha. Just wanted to say hello." Before he could answer, Torvani was between them, standing tall and silent. Letha dipped her head in farewell and vanished down the corridor. "You're letting them get closer," Torvani said. "I'm not letting anything happen," Evan shot back. "I'm just trying to do my job." "You do not understand your position here." "No, and no one will explain it either." Torvani's tail twitched. She studied him for a long moment. "Then I'll make it plain. You've been identified as genetically unique across multiple species, highly compatible, rare, valuable. I'm not a damn breeding horse. No, but others will treat you as such." Evan backed away. "I didn't sign up for this. I came here to fix processors, not to be offered like some prize." "You are the prize, Mace," she said simply. That night, he didn't return to his quarters. He walked for hours until he found a forgotten maintenance corridor that led to the outer dome. It was quiet, there. Too quiet. He stared up through the transparent ceiling at the stars above Dovener 7. So many lights, so many systems. And all he could think about was how he suddenly felt less like a person and more like a piece of living code. A sound echoed softly behind him. Footsteps. He turned. A tall figure stepped from the shadows. Not Torvani. Not Letha. This one shimmered faintly, like light through crystal. Her voice chimed when she spoke. You don't know me yet, Evan Mace, but I already know what you are. He took a step back, reaching instinctively for his tool wrench. The woman smiled, not threatening, just inevitable. You've become the axis around which old laws will turn. What are you talking about? He whispered. She touched her chest, and for a moment her body became translucent, showing a lattice of glowing energy inside. The mating continuity protocol, she said. He froze. She nodded. Double quote, soon you will understand everything. But for now, you should rest. You won't get much more time to yourself. She vanished before he could reply. Evan stood alone under the stars. Something massive was coming, and he had no idea how to stop it. The morning of the announcement arrived not with sirens, but silence. A thick, unnatural stillness blanketed Governor 7, like the colony itself was holding its breath. Evan Mace sat on the edge of his bed, half-dressed, one boot on, staring at the blinking terminal on his wall. He hadn't slept. Not really. His mind had been turning like a broken cooling fan all night, grinding against questions he couldn't silence. Why him? Why here? Why now? He tried to rationalize it. Genetics. Variants. The whispered phrase. Bioadaptability score still echoed from the message he'd read days ago. But that didn't explain the stairs. The shadows outside his door. The gifts. The way the women here seemed to measure his worth with something colder than desire, something clinical, strategic. He hadn't asked to be seen. But now he was. And he didn't like it. The terminal pinged again. This time, the message was short. Assembly Hall. Mandatory attendance. Code, Continuance Alpha. He exhaled hard. Continuance. The word had weight to it. His corridor was already busy by the time he stepped out. Dozens of beings moved in eerie synchronization, heading in the same direction. Zilani with veiled faces and silk-threaded robes. Crystal-bodied Vortic elders whose skin glimmered like fractal glass. Even the usually aloof Sullivan twins walked with purpose. As Evan joined the stream, he felt the eyes again. Not just from strangers. From people he'd worked beside, eaten next to. Maintenance officers, medical staff, even the security detail. They didn't greet him. They didn't smile. They just stared. By the time he entered the main assembly dome, the place was packed. Thousands of seats encircled the central stage. Like a great amphitheater, its roof high and transparent, revealing the pale blue skies above. The stage itself shimmered with a faint holographic field. He took a seat near the back, instinctively seeking distance. The lights dimmed. A ripple of blue shimmered across the stage as Chancellor Drixon materialized. The Serpentine leader stood, tall, his elongated form coiled with ceremonial regalia, his eyes golden and unblinking. Citizens of Governor 7, he began, voice booming through every wall, corridor, and communicator in the colony, we stand at a turning point. The mating continuity protocol, authorized by the Interstellar Genetic Council, has been triggered for the first time in over 3 decades. Gasps and murmurs rippled across the crowd. Drixn continued. The subject in question is a recent arrival. A human. Designation: Evan Mace. Evan froze. I know many of you have suspected, the Chancellor went on, but today we confirm. Mace's genome exhibits rare and unprecedented compatibility across not 1, but 4 native species. The room didn't erupt. It tightened. Like a storm pulling wind into itself, eyes turned toward him. Hundreds, thousands. Drixn gestured, and a display lit up behind him, showing complex DNA helixes, colored overlays, and adaptive projections. The probability of producing viable, hybrid offspring from his lineage exceeds 98% in Zilani, Vortic, Kithra, and Sullivan pairings. This makes him a keystone contributor to the genetic diversity and long-term viability of our combined colonies. Evan stood. Wait, no one ever. You will be offered a formal selection period. Drixon cut him off, voice calm but absolute. Eligible female candidates may now begin their courtship applications. The Continuity Council will ensure fairness, tradition, and colony prosperity. He raised both hands. This is our future, and it begins now. The lights shifted. The announcement ended, and the flood began. Evan backed into the corridor only to find himself surrounded. A Zelani noblewoman, tall and wrapped in ritual cloth, approached him first. I offer you peace, my lands, my name, and 3 bond children, genetically insured. Before he could respond, another stepped forward, her skin crystalline and glowing. I offer knowledge, the chance to be part of something that transcends species. You would father the next age of hybrid intellect. A Kithra female growled softly beside him, golden fur bristling. Forget talk. I offer strength, freedom. I offer the wild, not the sterile. He stepped back, heart racing. I didn't ask for any of this. A dozen more crowded in, each speaking, each pleading, each offering alliances, power, futures that weren't his. He turned and ran down the Fountain corridor, past the waiting guards, through the transport lift and into the lower vents where no one dared follow. He collapsed behind a supply rack.
Breath heaving, hands trembling. He had no say, no warning.
And now, no escape. His wrist console blinked. A new message. No sender. I died out at Reed. Meet me in the greenhouse dome at 3rd cycle. There's a way out. Wow. He stared at it, breathing hard. He hadn't seen her since that first day. That woman tending the plants. The only one who hadn't offered anything but quiet. Evan looked around at the pipes and walls, feeling there. Cold press against his back. They wanted his genes, but someone still wanted him. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only choice that mattered. Evan didn't go back to his quarters. After the announcement, he'd tried. He made it to the door, stood there. Watched the access panel blink, waiting for his fingerprint. But he couldn't lift his hand. Not when he could still hear the echo of Chancellor Drixon's voice in his head. This is our future. And it begins now. Now. Like a switch had been flipped and Evan Mace ceased to be a person. Now he was a protocol. A variable in some sterile algorithm designed to ensure interspecies survival. A prize with legs. A warm, walking solution. Not Evan. Not the guy who liked old machine schematics and grew tomatoes in pots back on Earth. Not the man who built his life around quiet spaces and unsaid things. He turned away from the door and walked. He didn't know how long he wandered. But when the hallway signs began displaying greenhouse temperature warnings, he knew where he was. He'd been here once by accident. A forgotten corridor. An unauthorized dome. The place where the air smelled like real dirt and things grew for no reason other than someone wanted them to. When he pushed open the curved hatch, warmth spilled out. The greenhouse dome was bathed in low amber light, filtered through petals of deep violet flora that hung from above like sleepy lanterns. Rows of glowing moss framed a winding path that snaked between flowering stalks, bioluminescent fruit trees, and humming plants that opened as he walked by. And at the center, barefoot in the soil and humming softly to herself, was her Lyra. She turned before he spoke, as if she'd felt him arrive. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. Evan's throat was dry. You left the message. She nodded, brushing dirt from her hands with slow grace. Her pale lavender skin caught the soft light, and the streaks of soil across her forearms didn't look out of place. They looked natural, like she belonged to the earth and the air more than to the steel world outside. You said there was a way out. I said there was a way, she corrected. I didn't promise it would be easy. He stepped into the garden slowly. Why are you helping me? Because you looked at me, Lyra said gently. The first time you came here. You looked at me like I was a person, not a profile, not a match. He stared at her, unsure what to say. I didn't submit a courtship application, she went on. My clan disapproved. My mother said I was wasting a perfect opportunity. But I couldn't do it, Evan. I couldn't compete for someone's DNA. He exhaled. I didn't want any of this. I know. They sat near a cluster of moonleaf ferns, their petals curling inward in the night cycle. She poured a drink from a gourd-shaped fruit and handed it to him. It tasted like mint and starlight. Around them, the plants whispered with soft rustling, as if they too had secrets. I'm not sure how much longer I can stand it, Evan admitted. Everywhere I go, someone's watching. They leave gifts. Outside my door. I can't even eat in peace. Yesterday, someone left a vial of their own blood as an offering. A vial, Lyra, like I'm some kind of fertility idol. She winced. That's a royal custom in some outer systems. An offering of legacy. Legacy, he repeated bitterly. What about me? Lyra touched his hand gently. Then let's talk about you. And they did. For hours. He told her about Earth, about how he used to take old broken radios apart just to see if he could make them hum again. He told her about his mother, who raised him alone and taught him that kindness wasn't weakness. He told her how he joined colony maintenance programs because machines didn't ask him to be charming or loud or wanted. They just asked him to understand Dot, and in turn, Lyra told him about her garden, about how none of it was sanctioned, how she grew it in secret for years, feeding it with black water and hidden UV rods, how her people treated emotion as weakness and how she hid hers in the roots of plants, where no one could touch them. They sat side by side, backs against a tree that glowed faintly with blue sap. The quiet between them felt less like silence and more like understanding. Evan, she said finally, the Colony Council is preparing for the selection ceremony. It's only days away, his stomach clenched. And I have to pick someone? Like a menu? You don't have to pick anyone. They'll force it, not if you leave. He turned to her, stunned. I know a way off-world, she whispered. There's a supply freighter leaving in 4 days. I can arrange for access stealth transport, no logs. It'll be risky, but it'll get you out. He blinked. You'd help me run? If that's what you want. He looked down at her hand, still resting against his. I don't know what I want, he admitted. But I know what I don't. I don't want to be chosen. I want to choose. I want to be seen, not scanned. Lyra's eyes shimmered in the low light. Then, stay, not for the ceremony, not for the colony. Stay for you. Stay for something real. He leaned forward slowly, unsure, afraid of pushing too far. But Lyra met him halfway. Their lips touched in the hush of the garden. It wasn't urgent or perfect. It was nervous, real, alive, and it was the first time Evan felt like he was the one making the decision. Outside the dome, the colony buzzed with plans, politics, and predictions. But in the garden, among the vines and silence, something had bloomed out, something the council couldn't measure, and something that would never fit into their equations. The next 3 days were a blur of tension, whispers, and increasing desperation. Evan kept to the edges of the colony like a ghost, avoiding public corridors and eating only in isolated storage bays. Every hallway felt like a trap. Every glance carried expectation. The females no longer just watched him, they began competing openly. Gifts escalated into symbolic acts. A Sylvan artisan sculpted his likeness out of crystal and placed it in the center of the communal atrium. A Kithra hunter presented him with the preserved heart of a tri-horned predator, proclaiming it a gesture of strength and virility. And then there was Raxa, the Vortic crystal being who had once spoken to him only in passing, now intercepted him near an oxygen intake shaft. Her voice, musical and calculated, slid into his ears like glass. "You're not built for hiding, Evan," she said, folding her translucent fingers in perfect precision. "You were meant to be seen, celebrated. Your genome is a fractal bridge. What you carry could shift species survival curves for millennia." "I'm not a damn bridge," he snapped. "I'm a man." Her crystalline brow furrowed. "A man who could save countless lives. Do you truly think love matters more than survival?" He walked away before he could say something he'd regret. But the question lingered like poison. Each night, he returned to Lyra's greenhouse, the one place the colony's logic seemed unable to touch. She had started sleeping there too, curled on a cot beside a bed of moonbrush vines. Her presence calmed him, grounded him. Their conversations grew deeper, not just about escape or pressure, but about things they had never shared with anyone, dreams they once had, places they wanted to see. The joy of unstructured time, something stolen from both of them by expectation and legacy. One evening, as the dome dimmed into simulated night, Evan stood in the soft glow of a glowing leaf canopy and asked the question that had been burning in him for days. "Do you ever wish I wasn't chosen?" Lyra looked up from a batch of nutrient soil she was blending. "I don't wish for that. I wish the choosing didn't exist." She walked to him, wiping dirt from her hands. "I wish they didn't see you as potential. I wish they saw what I see, a person who listens more than he talks, who touches things like he's afraid to break them, who's scared to run because it might mean losing something real." He looked down at her. "I don't want to leave you." "Then don't," she said quietly. "But if you stay, you have to decide what you're standing for." That night, they made love. Not as claimants, not as genetic investments, but as two people who wanted nothing more than to belong to each other, freely and without demand. They lay tangled in one another under the pulse of violet vines, their bodies slick with warmth and breath. For once, Evan's thoughts were still, until the morning. Lyra was still asleep when the emergency alert pinged on his console. Public tribunal requested by Colonial Genetics Council. Allegation: dereliction of genetic duty. He froze. Below, the headline was a list of names. Vlasha, Raxa, Marania of the Kithra, even one of the Vortani twins. All had filed complaints. All demanded formal arbitration. A subline chilled him to the bone. Recommended resolution. Council enforced selection override. They were going to make the choice for him. He stood, heart pounding, unsure what to do. And then he heard Lyra's voice behind him. "You have to stop them." He turned. She was already dressed, her eyes fierce and unreadable. "You told me once that machines are easier than people," she said, "because machines don't lie. But this colony is built on a lie that survival is all that matters. That love is a luxury. You have a voice, Evan. If you don't use it now, they'll never let you have one again." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll speak. What will you say?" He looked at her, at the garden, at everything they had built without permission. "I'll say no." The selection ceremony was scheduled for that afternoon. 3 suitors were being elevated for final consideration, but Evan Mace had no intention of playing along, because his silence was over, and now the colony was going to hear the one word it was never prepared for. The day of the selection ceremony dawned like the calm before a violent storm. Outside the greenhouse, the colony's walkways thrummed with activity. Drones buzzed overhead delivering ceremonial regalia. Data screens lit up with countdowns, and the dome-wide speaker system played soft harmonic chants composed by a Zilani choir. The air smelled of incense and engineered pheromones, carefully calibrated to encourage receptiveness and serenity. But inside Evan Mace, there was nothing calm. He dressed in the plain blue technician's uniform he'd arrived in, refusing to wear the ceremonial robes that had been delivered to his quarters hours earlier. Lyra helped smooth the wrinkles from his sleeves, her hands trembling slightly as she avoided his eyes. "You don't have to do this in front of everyone," she whispered. "We could still leave." Evan shook his head slowly. "If I run, they'll never change. Someone else will end up in this chair next cycle. Maybe someone who doesn't have a Lyra to hold on to." She gave him a small, pained smile. "Then, you go in there and tear it down." By the time he arrived at the Grand Assembly Chamber, the entire colony had gathered. It was a vast circular amphitheater with tiered balconies spiraling up into the high dome above. Light streamed down from the transparent ceiling, casting long, sacred beams over the central platform where 3 thrones sat, one for each final candidate. Velasha of the Kithra, Raxa of the Vortic, and Marenya of the Zelani. They each stood proudly, dressed in ceremonial garb stitched with their species' heritage. Weapons, jewelry, data scrolls, and ceremonial offerings were placed at their feet. Like trophies, each woman had earned a reputation of status and power. Each had prepared for this moment with meticulous care, and each looked at Evan not as a man but as a future. He stepped onto the center platform, his boots echoing through the silence. The Chancellor waited at the podium, his coiled frame unmoving, the ceremonial crest of Governor 7 glinting behind him. "Evan Mace," the Chancellor said, voice magnified through the dome. "You have been selected as the genetically optimal contributor for species continuation. As mandated by Protocol C9, you must now declare your chosen partner from the finalists presented." Thousands of eyes watched. The room held its breath. Evan stepped forward. "I refuse." The words hit the chamber like a thunderclap. Gasps broke out in every section. Whispers rose in shocked waves. Even the candidates shifted, their proud postures faltering. The Chancellor blinked. "Refusal is not an option. Your designation is—" "I am not a designation," Evan snapped. His voice cracked the silence, raw and full of fire. "I'm a human being, not a genetic vial, not a breeding plan, and certainly not your damn prize." Chaos erupted. Delegates began to rise from their seats, shouting over each other. The Vortic delegation demanded clarification. The Zelani elders whispered into translation devices. Even the Kithra guards took a step forward, tails twitching with agitation. Chancellor raised both hands. Silence. But Evan didn't stop. "You talk about species survival, but what about personal choice? You speak of protocol, but you ignore dignity. For 3 days I've been followed, analyzed, touched without consent, and offered like an item in a marketplace. And not one of you ever asked me what I wanted." He turned to the 3 candidates. "You're all impressive, powerful, but none of you saw me. You saw a chance, a solution, a conquest. But not me." He looked up at the crowd, scanning their stunned faces. There was someone who saw me. A side door opened. Lyra stepped into the chamber. No ceremonial robe, no fanfare. Just a stained work tunic and bare hands. Evan's voice softened. "She didn't offer planets. She didn't bring me charts or make promises about genetic legacy. She just sat beside me in a garden and let me breathe." Gasps rippled again, some in admiration, others in horror. The Chancellor's tone turned sharp. "This violates every precedent of the continuity protocol. If you refuse to comply, we will initiate override authority and assign you to the highest scoring candidate." "No," Evan said. Calmly, "you won't." He turned to face the crowd. "Because if you do, I leave. I've already secured off-world transport." And if I go public with how your council objectifies people in the name of genetics, Governor 7 won't just lose one technician. It'll lose reputation, funding, and every diplomatic partnership it holds dear. The threat wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. But it was real. Silence spread again, this time deeper. He had forced the impossible choice back onto them. After a long pause, a voice from the upper levels spoke. It was soft, gravelly, and old. "I second the motion to suspend enforced selection," said one of the Vortani elders. A moment later, a Kithra matriarch stood. Freedom of choice should never be sacrificed, even for survival. One by one, voices joined, at first scattered, then unified. By the end of the hour, the continuity protocol was suspended. For the first time in the colony's history, selection was declared voluntary. As the crowd dispersed, Lyra approached Evan at the center of the platform. "You just did something impossible," she whispered. He smiled. "I didn't want to be chosen. I wanted to choose. And I choose you." She touched his cheek, eyes glistening with quiet awe. "Then let's plant something that belongs to us." And beneath the towering dome of laws and legacy, they kissed gently, powerfully, while the entire world around them began, at last, to change. 6 months later, the garden was bigger than ever. Where once the dome had been an unauthorized hideaway with dim lighting and stolen water lines, now it stood as a centerpiece of the colony, officially sanctioned, funded, and visited by representatives from over a dozen species. It had a new name etched in every native language of Governor 7, the Garden of Choice. But to Evan and Lyra, it was still home. He knelt by a bed of thick-rooted tanglebark, fingers deep in the warm soil, calibrating the moisture levels of the new adaptive irrigation system he'd built from salvaged drone parts. Lyra stood nearby, explaining to a group of young hybrid students how certain flowers responded to emotional frequencies. When she smiled at them, they smiled back, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Evan leaned back on his heels, wiping sweat from his forehead. The colony's sun filter beams glittered through the translucent dome above, casting golden light on his arms. Peace had returned. But it was a peace earned, not given. The weeks following the public defiance of the continuity protocol had been brutal. There were votes, debates, threats of sanctions, and an entire investigation launched by the Interstellar Genetic Council. Raxa had resigned from her delegation in protest. Balasha challenged Evan to ritual combat, which he politely declined by quoting her own warrior code back to her, something about dignity being rooted in discipline. And yet, the system changed. The mandatory mating lottery was dismantled. In its place, the colony established a voluntary genetic partnership registry, focused on compatibility of mind, not just genome. Applications required emotional interviews, psychological matching, and mutual consent. Some species resisted, others adapted. But the culture had shifted, and the shift had a name: Evan's Rebellion. The term had spread beyond the colony. Other settlements across the outer ring began reconsidering forced continuation protocols. A few even suspended theirs outright, but Evan didn't think of it as rebellion. To him, it was just choosing. Now he lived in a greenhouse with the only person who had ever asked him what he wanted. "Hey!" Lyra's voice called gently, pulling him from his thoughts. She walked over, brushing a soft vine from her shoulder, cheeks flushed from lecturing. "You didn't eat breakfast again." Evan raised a brow. "You were up before me. Again." "I'm growing something new," she said, handing him a glowing pod. "It's from Earth hybrid basil and moonleaf. It's temperamental. Like you?" He laughed and took a bite. It tasted like home and starlight. They walked together through the rows of plants, the air alive with soft humming from the pollinating Vines and chirps from the tiny hexawings Lyra had invited into the ecosystem. As they passed the new entrance arch, Evan paused. A young couple stood just outside the dome, an aquatic girl with iridescent skin and a quiet, nervous-looking Vortami male. Evan nodded to them. "First time here?" The girl answered, "Where?" "Trying to figure out if we belong." Together. Everyone said this was the place to come. He looked at Lyra. She gave the couple a soft, reassuring smile. Evan held the entrance door open. "Then you're in the right place." Later that night, as the dome lights dimmed to their moonlit cycle, Evan lay beside Lyra beneath the chime leaf tree they had planted on the day the law changed. Its branches shimmered silver and blue above them, swaying in the programmed breeze. She traced a slow line on his forearm. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd picked someone else? Or said nothing at all?" He looked at her. "No, not once." She rolled onto her side. "They still talk about you, you know. Some think you're a hero. Some think you're a fool." "I'm fine being both," he said, kissing her forehead. "Because I didn't choose legacy, I didn't choose lineage. I chose you." She smiled, eyes glistening. "And I chose you." Outside the dome, the colony moved on, building, adapting, learning. But inside, something older and deeper was taking root. Not because it was efficient, not because it was expected, but because two people had looked at each other and said yes.